This is the Awkward GM Corbin, and today we will be discussing Wild Hunt Gangrel Bloodlines. So what are you going to get in Wild Hunt Gangrel? Well, you're going to get 10 Bloodlines, 4 of them updated, 6 of them new. You're going to get the passenger rules, which is converting the beast within a Gangrel into a separate entity, sort of like having a Geist in Sin Eater. You'll get new archetypes, devotions, merits, 3 new ghoul families, 2 new covenants, and 4 new horrors from the antagonist section of this book. These are the Baetyl Gangrel. They are basically rock elemental vampires. They gain the Auspex ability, and they have an ability called Bezoar Core, which means if they eat an inorganic object, it helps them improve their Auspex rolls. They also gain the Bloodline Curse, Chimeric Curse, which essentially means that their skin has turned to metal and rock, and mechanically it's very similar to the Nosferatu Clanbane. These vampires really remind me of the Gargoyles from the animated show called Gargoyles, especially because they've got the stone skin, but it even mimics the Gargoyles in that they go to sleep in the morning and then they wake up at night. That being said, I would want to try them out as a player. It definitely seems like an interesting bloodline, but for running them as an antagonist or an NPC, yeah, definitely, I'd run them. I'm not sure what I would do with them, but they definitely seem interesting to work with, and they could definitely be like an ally hidden in a back alley somewhere that's giving information to the players, especially if it's on top of a church or a cathedral. The Cerrid vampires, also known as Beguilers, are essentially traveling minstrel or busker vampires. They replace their resilience discipline with majesty and obfuscate. They have the bloodline gift Golden Throat, which means they start with an extra dot of expression, and when they use willpower with expression, instead of giving 3 dice, it gives 5. They also have the Denza Curse. The Cerrid needs to regain willpower from their mask via a performance or start slowly changing into an animal. I definitely like the combination of majesty and obfuscate as disciplines. It's just I'm not much of a musician type player character. Like I don't really like playing those types of characters, so it's just not for me. Would I run them as an NPC or an antagonist? Yes, totally. They fit the bill. They look interesting. I'm not sure what I would do with them in a story, but I could definitely see bringing them in as a side character. We're going to be doing a Vampire the Requiem video with Theo here, and if you'd like to affect what type of character he makes, please feel free to donate to my Patreon account that I've just started. I'll put a link in the description below. The Childer of the Morrigan. They are what you get if you take the Circle of the Crone and give them a standing army. They add Vigor as a discipline, and they gain the bloodline gift Banshee Kruak. They can spend willpower to cast 3 dot or lower Kruak rituals as instant actions, so long as the target is within line of sight, and it reduces the spell to potency 1. If the spell fails, it is a dramatic failure. Now, their bloodline curse is the Warmonger's Curse. They cannot back down from a fight or resolve an important issue without direct conflict, or they risk frenzy. These I dug into a little deeper. They're very tied to the Circle of the Crone, but there are some recommendations if you want to bring them into other covenants, such as Carthians or Invictus. And those types of recommendations usually border on the if a Circle of the Crone covenant finds out what they are and that they betrayed the Circle of the Crone, they're going to come after you. As a player character, I don't think I could see myself playing the Childer of the Morrigan, just because I don't really like the Circle of the Crone as a covenant. I not that I don't like them, it's just they're not on my top list of covenants I want to play. That being said, I would definitely bring them in as NPCs or antagonists because, hey, if you need some soldiers for the Circle of the Crone, they're here. The Daimonion are vampires who specialize in the psychology of the vampire's beast. They replace their resilience with the Auspex and Vigor disciplines, and they gain the bloodline gift and ear for the beast. Daimonion can use their Auspex to analyze a vampire's beast as well as other supernaturals that are similar, such as Sin Eater's Geists or a Strix. Bloodline Curse is the curse of attunement. When other vampires frenzy, they also risk frenzying as well. It kind of reminds me of a werewolf's death rage. Essentially, these vampires are kind of like the Elodoth from Werewolf the Forsaken. They can control the frenzy that vampires can do, similar to how the Elodoth can control death rage. That being said, would I play them as a player character? Yeah, I think so. These guys seem interesting, and they're also very much a synergistic component of a group. They're likely to help out rather than hinder. That being said, would I run them as antagonists? Totally. They can manipulate frenzy, and that's just such a big deal for any type of antagonist or NPC. If you want someone who goes out and makes sure that the masquerade doesn't breach, send one of these guys, and they'll calm down the frenzying vampire. The Dead Wolves are essentially vampires who are spiritually linked to werewolves and the Shadow. They gain Auspex as a discipline, and they also get Sublarnio as their bloodline gift. This is a merit that allows the vampire to become more werewolf, with abilities ranging from speaking first tongue to shifting into werewolf form, mimicking the Garu form from Forsaken. Their bloodline curse is the Moonstruck Curse, which means during full moons, their chosen moon phase, and being damaged by silver all cause the Dead Wolves to frenzy. Now, these guys are quintessentially werewolf in their creation. In fact, I think Vampire the Masquerade had a couple of background materials that said that the Gangrel in that game sometimes hung out with werewolves because they would do shape-shifting into a wolf form. That being said, this bloodline, I would totally play it as a player. I love the concept. I like the idea of this sort of werewolf vampire type creature. And I like that they have a similar aspect to them where they can manipulate spirits or interact with spirits. That being said, would I run them as antagonists or NPCs? Definitely. In fact, I probably could say for certain that this is my favorite bloodline of this book so far. The Mystikoi are spiritually religious vampires that hunt spirits. They gain Spiritus Sancti as a discipline and bloodline gift. What it does, it allows the vampire to hunt spirits in a variety of ways. They have the bloodline curse, Consubstantiation Curse. These vampires are limited on how many mortals they can feed from in a night. These guys are really interesting from a mechanical standpoint, but lore-wise they're seen as heretics by the Lycene Sanctum because of them feeding on spirits and other ephemeral entities. These guys, I really like them conceptually in that they could be a antagonist or NPC that gets thrown into a situation where they're on the run from the Sanctum who are trying to kill them. As a player character, I don't think I would run them just because I don't tend to play religious characters. That's just my personal preference. I really like the concept of them, that they can morph a little bit when they feed on spirits to become more spirit-like. So definitely keep a lookout for these guys. They're interesting to have in games. The Oberlochs are elderly hermit vampires that live in the mountains. They gain the dominant discipline, and they gain the bloodline gift Bloody Talent. The Oberlochs get discounts on devotions because they rarely interact with out-of-clan vampires. They also have the bloodline curse of Putrefying Curse, which means they visibly age even though they are immortal, which means, hey, if you're 200 years old, you're gonna look 200 years old. The Gangrel bloodlines typically fall into two categories. They either fall into the more bestial Gangrel or the more loner Gangrel. And this is definitely the loner Gangrel, but in a way that's more like the witch from Hansel and Gretel. Would I play these guys as a player character? No. They're very isolated, typically. However, the idea of them being this creature that's out in the mountains, as it were, looking down upon humans and sort of tricking people to come in for a nice bowl of soup or something and then feasting on them. That's all stuff I can get behind for like an antagonist or an NPC. So yeah, I would definitely bring them into my game. The Verlice are Van-Pires. They are vampires that can merge with cars. They replace the discipline of animalism with Auspex and Obfuscate, and their bloodline gift is the Ride. Verlice are able to ghoulify a vehicle to bond it to them, and their devotions only affect their ride, which means you can actually merge with your car. Their bloodline curse is the Stagnant Curse, which means these vampires must sleep in different areas every week, or their effective humanity is lowered till they do so. So, do I like this concept? Yes. If you have watched this channel for a while, I've definitely talked about Van-Pires a couple of times, much to the chagrin of some people. So the idea of that you have a vampire that can merge with a car is something I really like, and I really want to play a character that is a vampire. That being said, would I bring them in as NPCs or villains in my game? Totally would bring them in. The only downside is that they have to sleep in different areas because they're kind of a loner type Gangrel, like half of these vampire bloodlines are. So you have to deal with that, but that's not too bad. That's something I'll deal with. Being known for being in the middle of nowhere, no, that's not something I can really deal with for something like the Oberloch. Now we have the Wickers that are vampires that are essentially a swarm of hawks. They replace Resilient with Auspex and Nightmare, and they have the bloodline gift that all Wickers start with Protean swarm form for free. Their bloodline curse is the Curse of the Parliament. When Wickers fail breaking points, they attract the attention of the Strix. I've actually had a player play a Wicker now, and it's very interesting because they'll sort of use their animalism to send a rat or a bird somewhere, and then they'll like teleport to that location, killing the animal, but they're in a place they wouldn't normally be able to get to. Would I play them as a player character? Totally. The concept is very interesting, and I like that they're attached to the Strix. And I think in the book it says that they're called hawks and that they use hawks. And the reason I think that is because they want them to be a bit of an apex predator over the shadow owls that the Strix are. And hey, I'm not an expert in animals, so take that with a grain of salt. But I totally play these characters. They're interesting. Would I bring them in as NPCs or antagonists? Yes, definitely. Having a vampire that can swarm you with a bunch of birds or even probably bats, that is an interesting concept. The Yarilo are essentially what you would take if you had Poison Ivy and turned her into a vampire. They replace their Resilience discipline with Celerity and Dominate, and they have the bloodline gift of Rose and Thorn, which means they can use animalism on plants and gain an additional effects because of it. They have the bloodline curse of Tinderbox, which means they are even more susceptible to fire damage than other vampires. These guys definitely remind me of Dryads from Dungeons & Dragons or the Elder Scrolls series. I definitely would try them out, but they're not really my cup of tea when it comes to a vampire. I like the concept, I'm just not sure if I could come up with a good enough character for them. That being said, for an NPC or an antagonist, definitely have a lot of ideas coming up for them. Something I didn't touch on was that they have a merit that allows them to be psychically linked to a tree, and they can sort of teleport between different trees that other Yarilos are connected to. They're interesting concept, and they're definitely like the Lorax of vampires, though that's just me, probably. If you want to help Theo come up with his vampire character, what type of clan or covenant they're going to be in, feel free to join the Patreon down below, and we'll get that started. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good one. You're doing a good job, Theo.